Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Dear students, welcome to the class of Introduction to Logic and Critical Thinking. Today we will be specifically discussing about fallacy. A fallacy is an error in reasoning that makes an argument weak or invalid. It occurs when someone presents a claim that appears to be logical or persuasive on the surface, but upon closer examination, the reasoning behind it is flawed actually. Dear students, fallacies are not necessarily lies. They are often mistakes in the thinking that distort the logical connection between evidence and conclusion. For instance, if someone says he is a successful businessman, so whatever he says about economics must be true. That statement sounds convincing, but it is not logically sound. Being successful in business does not automatically make someone an expert in every area. Logic, on the other hand, is the study of correct reasoning. It basically teaches us how to construct valid arguments based on evidence, clarity, and consistency. A fallacy is basically a violation of the principles of logic. Where logic strengthens our reasoning, fallacies basically weaken it. Understanding fallacies basically helps us to identify when an argument is deceptive, biased, or simply not supported by the facts. This is particularly important in business and professional life, where decisions should be guided by rational analysis rather than emotional persuasions or faulty assumptions. Fallacies should be avoided in business dealings because they lead to poor decisions, poor understandings, and loss of trust. In marketing, human resource, or negotiations, reasoning errors can have real financial and reputational consequences. For example, in marketing, a company might say, everyone is buying our product, so it must be the best. This is not real awareness. It is simply an appeal to popularity. In hiring decisions, for instance, someone might claim he is too young to lead a team, which is a hasty generalization basically. Why? Because it is based on age rather than the ability. In negotiations, saying like either you accept this offer or your company will fail creates a false dilemma, ignoring all other possible options that are on the table. Business requires clarity, fairness, and logical communication, whereas fallacies, these create manipulation and confusion instead. Dear students, there are several common types of logical fallacies that often appear in the arguments. The first is the fallacy of the ad hominem, which means attacking the person instead of addressing the argument. For example, saying, do not listen to her marketing plan, she failed her last project, dismisses the argument by attacking the individual rather than evaluating the idea. In businesses, rejecting someone's proposal just because of the personal dislike or past mistake is a common example of ad hominem fallacy. The second fallacy is the strawman fallacy. It is the second type of the fallacy. This happens when someone misrepresents another person's argument to make it easier to attack. For instance, if someone says like we should reduce advertising costs, another one replies, so you want to shut down the marketing completely. This is a strawman argument. Why? Because it twists the original statement into something more extreme. In business, this occurs when competitors or colleagues exaggerate or distort each other's position to win an argument. The third type is the appeal to authority. This fallacy occurs when people believe something is true just because an authority or a famous person says so, even if that person is not an expert in that field. For example, a famous actor endorses this shampoo, so it must be the best. It is not a valid reasoning. Why? Because in business, this doesn't happen. In business, blindly following a senior executive opinion without data or research is also an example of an appeal to authority. The fourth fallacy is the fallacy of the false dilemma, also known as false dichotomy. This happens when someone presents only two options when actually more exist. For example, either we raise the prices or we go bankrupt, ignores all other possible solutions that may include, for instance, cost control or coming up with new marketing strategies. In business, this fallacy basically limits the creative problem solving and discourages the balanced decision making. The fifth fallacy is the slippery slope fallacy, which assumes that one small step will lead to a series of extreme negative outcomes. For example, if we allow employees to work from home once a week, soon no one will come to the office. So there is no evidence that one event will inevitably cause another. In business, such thinking prevents innovation and change because it exaggerates possible consequences. The sixth type of fallacy is the circular reasoning fallacy, also known as the begging the question. This occurs when the conclusion of an argument is simply restated as one of the premises with no actual proof. For example, our product is best because it is better than all others. So if you see this statement, it provides no evidence. It just repeats the claim. In business, saying we are successful because we are a great company without offering measurable proof is a classical example of circular reasoning. The seventh type of fallacy is hasty generalization. It happens when someone draws a conclusion from too little evidence. For instance, two employees were dishonest, so the entire department is corrupt. In business, making general assumptions based on limited data or one bad experience leads to unfair and inaccurate judgments. Good decision making requires comprehensive evidence, not assumptions. The eighth type of the fallacy is the red herring fallacy. This occurs when irrelevant information is introduced to distract from the main issue. For example, if someone is asked about the poor sales performance and is being responded in a way that, but our office looks great. So what they are basically doing is that they are diverting the attention away from the actual problem. In business, this is a common tactic to avoid accountability or shift focus during difficult discussions. The ninth fallacy is the post hoc ergo propter, which means after this, therefore, because of this. It assumes because one event followed another, the first must have caused the second. For example, sales dropped after we changed our logo, so the logo caused the drop. Correlation does not necessarily mean causation. In business, such reasoning can lead to wrong conclusions and misguided strategies if other factors and variables are completely ignored. The 10th and the final fallacy that we are going to discuss in today's lecture is the appeal to emotion fallacy. This occurs when someone uses emotion instead of logical reasoning to persuade others. For instance, if someone says, you should invest in my project because I have worked so hard on it, appeals to sympathy rather than the facts. In business, emotional appeals can, convince people on temporary basis, but they cannot replace evidence, data, and rational justification. Understanding and avoiding these fallacies is essential for sound reasoning and ethical communication. Recognizing them basically helps us to think critically, analyze our arguments objectively, and making rational business decisions. Logical thinking basically strengthens credibility, builds trust, and ensures fairness in professional discussions. Dear students, fallacies are not just academic concepts. These are kind of influencers that literally influence our real world outcomes, such as marketing errors, poor leadership choices, bad investments, and loss of reputation. Clear and logical communication is the foundation of sustainable success. So the next time you hear an argument in a meeting, a sales speech, or even a media statement, ask yourself whether it is truly logical or simply persuasive in appearance. Avoiding such fallacies basically helps us to think clearly, argue fairly, and making decisions that stand on reason rather than illusion. Thank you so much.